November the 23rd, 2006, I had the good fortune to interview my friend Stover Terry about his life, growing up, his family, and my dad, John Hall. I hope you enjoy.
I'm Stover Terry. I was born in Leatherwood, November 8th, 1925, and my parents was Stover B Terry and Edna Galden Terry. When I was a youngster, I grew up in a time period, it was, if I could have picked it in history, my time period to be born, I couldn't have picked a better time. I saw the advent of cars, the advent of radios and airplanes and stuff like that. Oh, they had a few around, but it is still the age of the horse and buggy. And with it was a whole lot of what we called old soldiers. Well, the old soldiers weren't the First World War veterans, they was the Civil War veterans. And they had ex-slaves around. I remember one time I was cradling wheat there. I had a field out in front of the house. This is when we lived down at Leatherwood. And a rattlesnake bit this old colored fellow. He was an ex-slave on the ankle. He was barefooted and had his breeches legs rolled up about halfway to his knees. Daddy got excited and wanted to take him to the doctor. And he'd say, no, says, I'll go down here and put my foot in this spring water, and says that fresh spring water will draw all the poison right out of it. And he went down there and he wouldn't go home to eat anything. Daddy tried to get him to come in to eat, and he wouldn't, so he'd take him some food down there for lunch. He stayed down there with his foot in that spring water until dark. I don't know how long he stayed after dark. But the next morning he was out there cradling wheat again, won't even no swelling where that rattlesnake bit him. I don't know whether it worked every time, I wouldn't advocate it, but it worked that time. Well, I lived in Leatherwood until I was 7 years old. That was 1931. Or 6 years old, whatever it was. November the 11th in 1931, we moved from Leatherwood to Patrick County, and that's where I grew up, in Patrick County. I remember a lot of things about Leatherwood, but at the same time, most of my memories are in Patrick County because that's where I grew up. And went to school, first a little one-room school down at Leatherwood called Galden School. It was Galden School because Grandpa donated the land to build a little old frame school building, one room. And when I went to Patrick County, I went to another one-room school, 7 grades in one room. And that was the finest institution of higher learning I've ever seen. I could do 5th grade work as a first grader because I listened to the teacher when she was having the other classes, and I learned by osmosis, you know. So I really did. I learned a lot. Then I closed that the second year. We went to the big school. That was a 2-room school. It is 7 grades and 2 rooms. So I went through the 5th grade and most of the 6th grade in that school. And I had some unfortunate circumstances that I didn't quite finish, but my grades was good enough to where I did pass. And then I walked 3 miles over across the line and caught the first bus to go to Sandy Ridge School. So went to Sandy Ridge for 3 years. Then I went back to Kreitz. They done got enough money to pay the taxes, have a school bus running. See, the school bus quit running in the 6th grade because they didn't have enough money to pay the school bus. So they just done away with it. And so I went to Kreitz. That's where I finished, Hardin Reynolds Memorial. Well, it was a school that was, they'd taken the name of Hardin Reynolds because he had donated a lot of money to the school, and the old Reynolds homestead was right over behind the school over there. And I knew Widow Reynolds. She used to come and hang around. That old lady was a trick. She had a mink coat. She wore it winter and summer. And she'd worn it so much that all the hair had gone off, was gone off of the sleeves, elbows, is just leather. And the same thing on the seat where she'd sat down, all the hair was gone, wore off of it. But she'd still wear that coat all the time. And she had a colored fellow that would, I don't know what his official title was, but he was like her Friday. If she was going somewhere in a car, that old Packard automobile they had, he was the chauffeur. If he was working around the house, he was a gardener. Whatever he was doing dictated his capacity as far as the way he fit into her homestead there. And the Reynolds homestead now is nothing like it was as I knew it. So as time progressed, we finished school, went into service, World War II. I went through World War II in Europe. We got out, and I worked a little while, and got to know my wife Julia and her family. And so as a result of that, 2 of her brothers and myself, we built a drive-in theater up here. All of us are broke. Didn't have any money, but we built it anyway. And Julia was working at DuPont, and she'd give all 3 of us a little piece of money. Yeah, I don't know whether it's weekly or monthly or what, but so I married my income. And it's a good move. That was the best thing I ever done. She said she saw me one time before the war, so I came up there with my daddy, and I got over in the back seat. He was out there. He wanted to see Mr. Davis about something. And I got in the back seat and stuck my feet out the window and went to sleep. And she said she saw my feet. But anyway, after the war was over, came back and everything was getting situated. She was going to have a party. And she had invited me to the party. And it was a cookout. Mr. Davis had a fish pond over there in the holler, and so they was going to have it over at the fish pond. Julia got in a car wreck, and she was all banged up, and her face was swelled up, and she looked a mess. And so I came on up to I came by to tell her I was going to come. And she was piled up in the bed with, like I say, she was a mess. But I could see an awful lot of good there. So that's the way I met Julia. And like I say, she was working in DuPont, and she had an income that was attractive to me. She's making $1.25 an hour. And when I went to work in the shipyard in New Shipbuilding and Dry Dock, I made 37.5 cents an hour. And see, that was big money. Don't forget the half cents now. And my room and board cost me $15 a week. They packed my lunch. Well, I made enough in 4 days. Let me see. Monday through Friday, I made enough to pay my room and board, and I'd work for half a day on Saturday. And that was time and a half, and that was all mine. I done had my expenses paid. Then I got a job at a pawn shop down there on Washington Avenue. I'd work in the pawn shop and goes back to that trading again. So, working for an old Jewish fella, couldn't speak good English. Somebody'd bring something in. He had a place just jam-packed. There's just little paths in it. Somebody'd bring something in. He'd offer them $2 for it, or $3. Might be worth $100. They'd say, that thing's worth $100. He says, I certainly do hope it's worth $100. I want to be sure you come back and pick it up. I don't want no more junk. Look here, I got all this junk hanging up here. And he wouldn't give much for stuff. And some of it today, by today's standards, was really fine stuff. But he sure didn't put nothing in it. I found out early on that a pawn shop made money. And after we got the theater going, that is when I met John, because someone told us about John. He came over here. He was just going into the bookkeeping service. And he was going to keep books, keep our books, our records. Clear us as far as taxes goes, anyway. And I know I come in up here at the ticket booth. That's where he was. That first time I ever saw him, I had on a pair of old bib overalls, and the whole knee was ripped out of it. John looked at me very questionable, like, who are you? He didn't say it. But it turned out I was one of the owners, and John paid our bills and kept our books for a number of years in there. And I learned to think a lot of him during that period of time. And John and I started hunting together. And John was I'm not sure that John was a hunter to start with, but he followed me around. I followed him one. And his brother had a place up in Bath County. We'd go up there deer hunting. Enjoyed it very much. Everybody enjoyed it. We'd traipse around all over the mountains, but you go across on the left-hand side going up, it was a big back creek coming down. You had to wade the creek. And that water was cold, especially in the wintertime. It'd be ice all over you. You'd walk out in it. And what you'd do would be pull off your shoes and everything. You'd walk it barefooted, and when you come out, you rub your feet down, they'd get just toasty warm. They'd stay warm all day. It would set up the blood flow in your feet. And of course, when you got ready to come back, we'd pull off our shoes, wade it back, rub down our feet. That's what we'd do for the night. And I know one time our oldest son was with us up there. This sticks in my mind as being right funny. And the main mountain was like a hogback, and you got little ribs coming down the ribs of the mountain, and it was old bear up there, and our son started shooting, and he'd say, "Bear, bear, bang, bang." John was standing there with a rifle on his shoulder. He says, "What are you shooting it there for?" So, and I'm glad it didn't hit the old bear, because he went up and climbed a tree, and something limb broke or something, and the old bear fell, and you could hear the old bear go woof. And so he went on up a hill. But if you hit a bear wrong, it can be a mean critter. So I think he's lucky that didn't hit no bear. Up in Bath County, John's brother, Posey, we called him Junior, he and Sharon lived up there, and they got to having so much trouble with the ghost up there, they moved out, just left everything. And so John and I paid taxes on the place, and we used it as a kind of a hunting club, a hunting camp. And one night it was cold as could be, and snow on the ground, and we had an old upright wood stove over there, and I'd taken a chainsaw up there. We had a bunch of wood cut, and we was firing that thing up, and it was red hot. It was warm in the house. During the course of the night, sometime, I heard somebody coming down the steps, clump, clump, clump. And they had a sleigh bells hanging on the door. Heard the front door open. Whoever it was went out. Laying there, said, "Boy, I wouldn't want to go out tonight." But no one ever came back in. Next morning, asking, no one went out. But I know it. I heard them. Other people heard them. Heard them. And there was no tracks in the snow. It's a kind of strange thing. But it didn't deter us. We figured if it was a ghost there, it was friendly. So we had a big time up there. One thing about John and I, like I say, was good friends, but we wouldn't talk about to each other like we was friends. We would be kind of rough with each other in our conversation. And my wife, Julia, told me one time, said if nobody didn't know better, they'd think that y'all was going to get together and fight. But it was, phones then was not private lines. There's 2 and 3 and 4 party lines. And so I'd call John, or he'd call me one later at night after everybody else got to bed, and sometimes we'd talk for an hour or two, and so we just enjoyed talking to each other. He was a very intelligent person after you got to know him. You have to know John, and he loved to think. In fact, after his health got pretty sour on him, he told me one day, he said, "Claire, I believe if you had the technology just to cut my head off and set it on a table, and I could just sit there and eat spare ribs and think." I said I could spend years doing that, just eating spare ribs and thinking. He loved them spare ribs and barbecued ribs. So he was willing to, he said he'd be willing to do that if they had the technology to do it. I've always traded. That's the way I lived when I grew up. And traded a little bit, and John got trading. I fooled with coins. I liked the idea of coins, and John started fooling with coins. We'd go up Hillsville, up there on Labor Day, and I always had a setup, still have it in fact. Don't go anymore the last couple of years, but John, Jack Bishop, us, we'd go up there, and you met some wonderful people up there, and they found out the things you liked, and I could go up there with nothing, and the people would bring me plenty to eat. I knew the people found out I liked pie, chocolate pie. I also liked fruit pies, you know, and blueberries. They'd bring up blueberry pie. They'd bring fried apple pies. And Julia always fixed a bunch of fried apple pies to go up there. And I'd say that over half of just being in Hillsville was to see the people. That was a big thing. And you'd trade a little bit and buy a little something and sell a little something. All told, it was enjoyable. And John was there, and Jack was there, and Keith was there. Keith is Jack's son. And it was enough people to where if you wanted to walk off and leave your setup, it was enough people had to look after it. So I appreciated those people being there. I was the one set up, but I appreciated them being there, and they had a little stuff they'd put out too. So we had a real big time. And it always rained sometime, a bad weather of some kind at Hillsville. Rarely ever would you have one that wasn't. And the old fellow sat up there beside of us, Mr. Sidney Allen Akers. His mother was a Allen, and he was named after her brothers. That's the Allens that shot up the Hillsville courthouse at one time. But he is named after his uncle Sidney. So Sidney Allen Akers told me that he'd spent all of his life up there, and said, I've seen it frost up here every month of the year except in July. And I know one morning that at Labor Day, our younger son scraped frost off of a piece of canvas and made a snowball and throwed it at me. Chris throwed a snowball at me in Labor Day. The things that happened in the service was, well, it just happened. When I went in service, they gave you all kind of tests and find out what your aptitudes and IQ was, and I guess my IQ done pretty good, and my aptitudes was really pretty good. And so they put me in research and development, R&D, up at Aberdeen Proving Grounds. And I was very disappointed. I wanted to get out from in there and go see some of the world. And so every morning I'd go down to the old first and complain to him. And one morning he pulled out I walked in, and he never even said anything, and he pulled out a big brown manila envelope that had my service records in it, and he wrote infantry right across the face of it. That night I was on a troop train going to Fort McClellan, Alabama. And some of those tests caught up with me, and they shipped me over to the 5th Regiment, which was a specialized regiment. And then I was bad to volunteer for stuff, and you don't do that in service. I ended up volunteering for 2 or 3 things, and one of which was a commando school. And I was glad when that training was over with. I was a commando, and I don't think I was cut out for that. And then the radio operator, I'd go to sleep taking copy. Message center I didn't like. Wire section. Had to get out and run around like a bunch of wild Indians. I liked that. Always gone somewhere, and they're going and they're moving. And so when we got in the wire section, I stuck. And went overseas, well, I stayed there in Camp Shelby for I don't forgot how long. Then it went into Van Dorn, Mississippi as kind of a holding, Van Dorn, Louisiana, I mean, that was kind of a holding camp. Stayed a little while and went up to Camp Shelby, Mississippi, and they was reactivating the 69th Infantry Division. It was an old World War I, but had been deactivated, and they was reactivating it. And I went overseas with the 69th Infantry Division. And had a little traumatic experience going over. We got in a hurricane out in the North Sea, and it was a convoy. We was on an old ship that was its maiden voyage, but it had been converted 3 times. It had the lines of a tanker, been converted from a tanker to a victory ship, and from a victory ship to a liberty ship before it ever even went to sea. And we had 90 to 110 foot waves. That hull couldn't take that, and it started leaking, taking on water. The convoy went and left us, put out the boilers. We didn't have no power, no stirs, nothing. We were just floating. And so they left 2 little DEs back there with us, one on each side. They was too far out, I thought, to suit me. And they got to throw an ash can. Well, later the storm went on by, and we was up in the North Sea then. So a submarine did get after us. And I'd stay up on top side and watch them throw ash cans off the submarine. Finally, they got so hot after it, that submarine come and got onto our ship. We done picked up steerage again. We was under power again. And those old giant slicks was worse on me personally than the waves was. I didn't get sick, which was most of everyone did. But they was throwing them ash cans entirely too close then. I couldn't get the Navy to do what I wanted them to do. I thought they was going to sink our old ship, just trying to blast that submarine out. Anyway, finally it is gone. I don't know whether they got it or not. And we got into England, and it might have been a good thing, because the lines are 65 miles up into France before we went across the channel into France. And we was up at Gournay, France. And we went through France, Luxembourg, Belgium, into Germany, and on up till the war was over. And the war, you weren't going to come home then. You had 2 ways to come home. Either they carry you out, or the war was over. You was out for the duration. We knew that. Everybody knew that, and we were told that. And I still think it's some merit to that, because people, you got to get acclimated to combat. And everybody gets scared to start off with, but the longer you're there, the more canny you get, and you learn to take care of yourself. And most of the casualties was of the replacements that come in. Rarely ever would one of the fellas get hurt, get killed, anything. Always replacements. And so I think they make a mistake now in rotating troops. But that's just my personal opinion.
Now, what was so you were in the Navy?
I was in the Army.
You were in the Army, okay. Can you just say you were in the Army, what was your rank, and when did you serve?
I was a PFC. I didn't want any command. I didn't want to be responsible for anybody but me. It wouldn't have done for me to have a group of people and a bunch of them get killed. You know, I couldn't handle that. And I'd have been questioning myself the rest of my life if I'd have done this, if I'd have done that, you know. So I didn't want any command. But at one time, they had what they called a battlefield commissions. Anybody with a certain amount of experience, they'd make them a second lieutenant. But a second lieutenant was a platoon leader. His life, I think, was 38 minutes. I didn't like the idea of that. And so I still wanted to be me, just not responsible for anybody but me. Now, after the war was over, you know, it was taking on a few different dimensions then, because they had a point system, and the high pointers stayed over there for occupation, and low pointers were going to come home, regroup, retrain, go to Pacific. Well, those low pointers came home to regroup, retrain, and the war was over in the Pacific, and they got discharged before I did. I always wondered about that, but that's the way it worked. And one of the things that all of us had a guardian angel. I believe in that. I truly do believe in a guardian angel. And I was going down the Autobahn one night with blackout. You couldn't see anything, cloudy, just. And I was driving a Jeep, and all of a sudden I heard a horn blow. I asked a fellow in the Jeep with me, "You hear that horn?" He said, "No, I heard it plainly." I stopped, got out. Don't know why I stopped, but that horn bothered me. It was a dual set of horns. And it was a shadow in the road out in front of the Jeep. I felt of it with my foot on no road there. So I scratched around and found a gravel, a rock, or something, and threw it over in it. Man, it was a long ways down. I turned around and cut out of there. Next day I went back, and the Germans had blown a bridge. I could run off of that thing, and I'd have fell. It was way, way down. And I never will forget that. So if I hear today a dual set of horns blow, I'm going to pay attention. Immediately, well, it was really before the war was over, I was in the first group of Americans that met the Russians. And it was a peculiar situation. Up on the Elbe River and Mulder River, and we'd wander around any way we wanted to, even go behind the German lines, and the Germans didn't mind us. They weren't fighting the Americans, they were still fighting the Russians. And they had some kind of signals arranged where if the Russians would sight the Americans, they'd fire a red flare We'd answer them with the blue file, or vice versa, I done forgot. Anyway, they saw us and fired the flare. We didn't have a flare to answer them with. So the situation kind of got tense. Some shots was fired. We got a German prisoner. You know, it was a Russian, that he was a prisoner of the Germans, put it like that. And we drew an American flag on a piece of paper, like you wrap up meat with, white paper. Sent that up there. They thought the Germans trying to play a trick on them. So then we got a whole bed sheet and painted up like American flag and sent it up there, and they finally believed us. And so that was the way that we met the Russians, but that is not the way the history proclaims it.
How does history proclaim it?
It was planned and organized and everything, and in history, but it wasn't. It was an accident. We just out riding around, see what we could see.
It was an accident that you met them. In other words, you was the wrong group. You weren't the planned group.
So, and they built a monument over there and a bunch of stuff to where the linkage was. And in 50 years, we were supposed to go back, us and our Russian counterparts that met up there. And I talked to a couple of the fellows and they weren't going. And so I decided Bill Clinton could go over there for me. He was president then. He could go over there for me, even though he was a draft dodger. So he went over there, and one of the things of the 50th year celebration was that they could fly into Moscow on a Russian plane. I don't know what them Russian planes is like now, but they didn't maintain them too well then. They had to flop the wings to take off like a bird. They was a poor grade planes. So I wasn't about to fly a Russian plane. Anyway, we didn't go. I've mentioned Julia several times, how I met her. But anyway, we ended up with 3 boys, Joe, Bland, and Chris. Each of them in turn presented us with, Bland had he had 2 children, which is grandchildren. Joe had 2 children. Each of them had a boy and a girl, and Chris had 3 boys. That's 7 grandchildren, 5 boys and 2 girls. And we think a lot of our grandchildren. And Scott is the oldest grandchild. He's in the Navy. He's already pulled one term over in Iraq, and another in Guantanamo Bay, and I don't know how many times he's flown backwards and forwards from Iraq to Afghanistan to here. And he liked it over there. He says, "Pop, we're doing a lot of good over there." He says, all the things the news tell you is not right. He says, it's 17 provinces in Iraq, and all of them stable, but 3 and some trouble in the 4th one. He said the Sunni Triangle right around Baghdad is where all the trouble is, and says that's where all the news media get their information. And said they don't report on any of the good stuff that's happening, and it's a lot of good things that's happening in Iraq. And he liked it over there. So he was talking about volunteering for 13 months to go over in Iraq or Afghanistan or somewhere. And he's our oldest grandson. He has a twin sister, Allison. She's in UNCG down in Carolina in college, down at Greensboro. And then Joe's two children, a boy and a girl, both of them in college, and both of them are finished this year, I believe. And Chris's children are younger, and his oldest boy, which is 15 now, he can play the piano beautifully. He has played in concerts. He really does a wonderful job on the piano. And I don't know where they got the talent from. It must have been my wife, Julia, because they certainly didn't get it from me. I couldn't carry a tune in a bucket. But they all musically inclined. Scott will play anything that's got a string on it, as banjo preferably. He don't do very well on a fiddle or violin something, but Paul can. Paul play a violin or fiddle. Allison plays piano and a banjo. I don't know, they all play something, and when they gather in out here one time, they'd sit out on the porch in the summertime and play, and they called themselves the Scattered Grass because they were scattered so far. And Courtney, she didn't play anything, but she'd keep time with the spoons, you know, pair of spoons. So, yeah, and Courtney is the only granddaughter we have that's married. In fact, the only grandchild that we have that's married. That she's married, and she lives down in Tennessee, and she will finish college this year, so far as I know. Well, next spring, really, this semester, this college year. So they'll be coming in for Thanksgiving this coming Friday evening, late. Don't see much of Courtney. It's good to have a little humor in life, but if you tell somebody something for the truth, let it be the truth. Don't never veer from it. You don't have to worry about, if you tell somebody the truth, you don't have to scotch it. If you tell somebody the untruth, you got to keep telling untruths to kind of chink it up. And be truthful. Be yourself. Don't try to copy somebody. There's no one that can copy somebody and be anything but a copy. And most people don't like a copy. They like the original. So be yourself.